Well, our thanks as always to Home Street Bank for their support of this podcast. If you're looking for a bank that has it all, great people, great service, great rates, this is the place for you. This is my lender of choice. It should be yours as well. Go to homestreetbank.com. It's your one-stop shop for all your banking needs, both business and personal. That's homestreetbank.com. How do you feel about change? Does it scare you? Excite you? But more importantly, how does your customer feel about change? You need to know that, and we'll explain why on today's episode of The Buyer's Mind.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shaw.
Well, welcome everyone once again to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a stroll through the buying brain. We believe that the most important thing that you can do in the world of sales is to understand the way that your buyer makes purchase decisions. And when you do that, you can reverse engineer your sales presentation accordingly. Because ultimately, we want to be partners with our customers. We want to come alongside our customers. If we really want to serve them well, we need to understand the way that they think. And the buying process is about changing your circumstances in some way, right? That's really when I'm buying something, that's what I'm doing. I'm seeking to change my circumstances. Now, in some cases, that's exciting. When you get your first car, for example, but it can also be downright scary. And it turns out how you feel is based largely on who you are. So today we're going to look at that issue of change. Paul Murphy, our show producer, you know me, and you know that I dig change. So now be honest, because I'm a change freak and I'm constantly out there, even in our company going, hey, let's do this, it'll be fun. Does that frustrate you?
I wouldn't say it frustrates me, but I typically like routine. I like things to remain steady. That's just where I come from. But yeah, does it frustrate me? It's a good question. It certainly pulls me out of my comfort zone. I'll say that much.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when we think of our role as salespeople, we are asking people to change, right? That's what we're really doing. When we ask somebody to buy, we are asking them to change. And you might be talking to somebody who is just not all that much of a change freak, or maybe you're talking to them not because they want to change, but because they have to change. Something went wrong in their life that needs to be remedied. And so it's easy to see where a customer is in a difficult spot. They really like normalcy. They really like predictability. They really like that stability that's out there. And yet oftentimes the buying process takes us outside the comfort zone. I'm sure you see that in your own life, Murph.
I agree with you because it's those moments where I have to have something change. And that's where I find myself talking to a salesperson is because I need to make that change, whether that's selling my home, getting a new car, whatever that may be, something is got to change. And so I'm forced into that position of having to move out of my comfort zone.
Well, I think this is why it's so important that sales professionals understand the intricacies of change, because again, there are some people who are they're all in. It's like, yeah, I love change anyway, and now I'm really excited I get to buy this whatever I've been saving up for and dreaming about for a long time. But for so many people, they approach this with fear and trepidation because buying something represents change and they're not that much of a change freak. So let me just lay this quote on you. This is from the German scientist Georg Lichtenberg. He says, "I cannot say whether things will get better if we change. What I can say is they must change if they are to get better." That's a great quote. I cannot say whether things will get better if we change. But what I can say is they must change if they are to get better. Listen, can I make a suggestion to you? Forget whether you like it. Change is a necessity to improvement. That's true for you, and it's true for your buyer. Change is a necessity to improvement. You do not get better when you stay the same. Those two concepts are exclusive to one another. You have to look at it and say that that if you want change, or if you want things to get better, it's going to require change. Change is a necessity to improvement. So I just want to challenge you, sales professionals, even in your own life. What are you doing to get better? What are you doing to improve? What are you doing to embrace change, even though it might be uncomfortable, because you know on the other side of that change is a better version of you, a better sales professional, a better customer care professional, somebody who can really make a huge difference in your life and the life of your customers, your organization, even your own family. What are you doing to embrace change in order to improve? Well, before we get to our interview, let me just ask you this question in the form of our tip of the day. I'm going to recommend that you ask yourself a question. What scares you about making a change? Ask yourself the question, what scares you about making a change? Because there's an opportunity here for vulnerability and honesty when I ask myself that question. What scares me about making a change? So what I do here is when I ask that question and I'm actually labeling it, I'm writing it down, I'm pulling it out of my brain. Then what I'm doing is I'm pulling it out of the emotional side of the brain and I'm putting it into the logical side of the brain. I'm looking at this in an analytical way. I'm asking myself the question, what scares me? And I'm actually analyzing that. So what happens here is when we think about what scares us, we tend to think about fear. Fear resides in the emotional part of the brain. And our brain is wired for self-protection. So typically when we feel fear, our natural response is to say, run, get away, got to get out of this situation. But when I analyze it, when I label it, when I evaluate it, now I'm doing this from the logical side of my brain, and it opens up to all kinds of understanding about why I'm feeling that way. It also opens me up to an understanding of the anticipated regret that oftentimes goes along with the idea of change. Oftentimes when we think about change, we catastrophize what's going to happen if we change. And then again, the fear takes over and we bail out on this. But if we're doing this logically and analytically, then what are we going to see? That anticipated regret is it's not nearly as real as our emotional brain wants it to be. So I just want to ask you to take some time to ask yourself, in the sales process, in life in general, what scares you about making a change? It's a great way to be able to be self-evaluative in order to determine what you can move forward on without that fear barrier getting in your way. Well, Dr. Marcia Reynolds is one of the nation's leaders on the subject of behavioral economics. It's a fancy way of saying, how do we make decisions? She has a doctoral degree and 2 master's degrees, so she's clearly in the lead in an academic race with yours truly. She's a coach, a consultant, a speaker, and the author of several books, including the landmark Outsmart Your Brain. She's the owner and president of the consulting firm Co-Visioning. She has a particular interest in the areas of discomfort, which puts her in hero status in my book. Please welcome Dr. Marcia Reynolds. Marcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
Let's get to just some of the basics, some of the foundational work here. Our audience is largely involved in the practice of influence theory and sales is about change, and change is hard. So let's just start there from a fundamental level. Why is change so hard for people?
To start off with, information doesn't change behavior. I mean, how many things do you know you should be doing, but you're just not doing it? Mm-hmm. So the thing is that we keep telling people, oh, you should do this because it's good for you, or it's good for the environment, or whatever. But even if people agree with you, that doesn't mean it's going to change their mind. So that's the first thing, is understanding that change doesn't happen until we truly feel that it's going to be safe that we do it, that we're going to love what we do. I mean, it's all these emotions that are wrapped into, will I even stick with this change? You know, and the second thing is that so many times people learn change under fear. You better do this or else. Well, that kind of learning is lodged way deep in our brain. And so when you tell people you need to change that, it's almost impossible to change something we learned first based on fear. It's a primal, it becomes a primal survival thing. So it's almost like you have to start all over. So you go back to the first thing. How can I create an emotional experience so people might change?
Okay, so is there, how much of this is born of our own personality? I mean, look, my sense is that you and I are probably alike in this one way, and that is I kind of feel like I like change, right? I get bored easily, and to me, there's, I kind of look and say, life is a buffet, and I want to get full. So how much of this is based on your personality itself?
Well, there are the two complete opposites, and most of us sit somewhere in the middle. There's those of us that love to jump over the cliff and then look, and there's other people that have to calculate, how far down is the cliff and what's going to happen when I hit the bottom, and there's just so many things that they have to know in order to feel safe. So their greatest need is safety, where our greatest need is novelty. So is that personality? Possibly, but it's also driven well into your brain from a very young age, where these needs that become our primary needs. So you have to look at different people have different needs, and so why I say I'm not sure that it's personality, because somebody who has a great need for safety, you might think, oh, well, they're an introvert. Well, no, not necessarily. That's just, again, how they were raised, and it became important. And other people have different needs. Some people have just needs for recognition. Is this going to help me in my achievement or my recognition? And so it really is based on what are the things that not just that I most need to feel good, but also when I don't get that, then I don't feel good. But I also there's a lot of other things. I don't feel like I'm satisfied. I don't feel content. So it really depends on finding out the individual, what is most important to them.
Yeah, I would think about there's got to be a lot of room for conflict right there, right? For me, I'm much more of an adventure guy than a safety guy, but also recognize that I have people in my life that are very much into safety, and so there's an immediate opportunity for conflict. And I suppose we could see that even in a sales environment where a salesperson is like, hey, you live once, you owe it to yourself. Here we go, talking to somebody who is otherwise very safety driven. We've got a recipe for disaster right there.
Absolutely. You cannot ever think that people are just like you. That's like the worst mistake. You've got to find out what's necessary for them. And there's so many things that could come into conflict. I had a previous relationship with a man who was a surgeon, and he was very methodical, and he liked every order and predictability. And again, you and I are like risk takers, so predictability is probably not a big deal. I don't have to know what's going to happen. I don't have to have things in order. To him, I was a mess, always a mess. And I'm like, well, I know where everything is. And so there's just so many different needs that can conflict. And again, it's not wrong when somebody has different needs than you, but we have to be curious about what's most important to them.
The brain, in order just to first survive and then figure out how to function in the world around us, constructs rules to live by, heuristics, biases, just mental rules of thumb. These things are there's a lot of different theories, I know, as to how we form these things, but they can be really hard to change. Why is it? Why is it so hard to change our own internal biases?
Well, for one thing, those biases and needs kind of are a part of this structure that we call ego. And the thing about ego is everyone uses it as a negative term. He has a big ego. But you have a big ego. I have a big ego. Everybody does, because that's how we survive. It's a definition in my brain of who I think I am and how I see the world. And I have to have that very strong, Or I can't wake up in the morning and do anything. I can't wake up wondering who I am and where I am, although sometimes I do that when I travel.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's very hard structures. So, and really the only way to break or make long-term behavioral change is I have to see myself and the world around me in a different way. I have to be able to expand that. That's not an easy thing to do because, again, we defend it because, who I think I am is how I operate on a daily basis. And so you just can't tell people, again, that this should be important to you, or you better do this or else, because it has to fit in with, their ego structure, or they will either argue with you or just shut down.
So part of this has to come down to our own need to be emotionally intelligent about ourselves, even to allow ourselves to get out of the way, focus in on the person in front of us. Because when you're looking at it and saying that people learn change, or we try and impose change through threats, do this or else, which sounds like basically every person's childhood at some point.
Right.
And yet, if we can understand what the fear is for somebody to stay where they're at, that there is a danger in not changing. I'm not trying to be manipulative here. I'm just trying to suggest that I need to get out of my own way in order to really understand what's going on in the brain of the person in front of me.
Absolutely. I would say you have to put your brain in curiosity mode. It's not about what you know, it's about what you need to learn about them. And honestly, it's the best way of changing someone's mind is to really listen to how they see things, how they're defining what's in front of them or the situation, and then just summarize it back to them. So you're telling me this is what you believe to be true, this is how you see things. What's really fascinating is that we don't do that for ourselves. We don't look inward and see our frames. But when somebody repeats it back to us and we have to, then it's sitting on the table and we're looking at it, we may see like, oh, that's not really logical, is that? Or maybe there is another possibility. And so the best way really to start changing someone's mind is, again, just to sit and listen to them and be really curious and use reflection. Hold up the mirror. So you're telling me you believe this, or this is how you see that, and then asking, so is there any other possibility there? Or what would happen if you saw it in a different way?
It's interesting because you're saying we have to be able to understand ourselves, our own thinking patterns, before we can understand the thinking patterns of the people around us. And yet you suggest that the brain resists self-imposed exploration. Why is that?
Actually, that comes a lot from Daniel Kahneman's work, the Nobel Prize winner for behavioral economics.
A gentleman of whom we mention quite frequently on this podcast.
I love thinking fast and slow.
Oh, it's just an amazing
and the example that he gives that I absolutely love, he says, just try to tickle yourself. And you say, you can't, because your brain says, I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to let you. Well, it's the same thing when we try to analyze our brains and try to figure things out. And even I, who have been studying this for years, I can't do it. I have to call my coach. This is why I love coaching. And then she asks me the questions, and I go, oh, yeah. Oh, I do that, don't I? So there's just this natural resistance to, again, affecting anything, asking ourselves or exploring that might crack that ego structure. But yet, when somebody else uses reflection and question, it works. So, why that brain works that way, honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah. But, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but it sounds then that based on what you're saying right there, that salespeople can play this counseling role in the opportunity to show people themselves.
And honestly, it's a coaching. approach of just, again, being curious and sharing what you hear them say, noticing any shifts in their emotion, and then just asking questions about that.
You recently wrote in your blog about the concept of psychological safety. That's an interesting term. I've not heard it before. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what it is and why it's important?
Yeah, sure. And a lot of what I'm talking about here, the whole safety bubble, is in my book, The Discomfort Zone.
Mm-hmm.
And which is really how to have these conversations. And there's 3 things in creating psychological safety. And the first one is the person has to feel that you have, your intention is to help them achieve something they want. So, and this is so important for salespeople, that it's not about what you want and you want them to do. You have to discover what's the goal that they want, what's the end result they want, that you are there to help them achieve. And if you don't know what that is, that's the first thing that you want to be asking questions about, to find out what is that goal that's important to them, or that outcome. They have to feel you're there for them. And they won't even listen to you if you don't do that. The second one is your emotional tone. Are you going in there with that you care, that you're curious, that you're hopeful, that you're excited? And you have to monitor your emotions, and that's where emotional intelligence comes in, and keep those positive emotions. And the third one is respect. Do you respect this person that you're with? And again, we have to be really careful, in a sales mode, if the person is resisting you, and do you get in your brain, do you think they're an idiot? Mm-hmm. The moment you move into that, you're going to cut your relationship with them. There's not going to be psychological safety.
So there's a heartfelt respect first, and then a demonstrable effect. I think a lot of salespeople try and get the respect technique down when deep down in their brain they may be making moral judgments about the person standing right in front of them. How important is that level of trust that needs to be developed? We all know trust is important, but I want to look at it specifically when it comes to challenging someone's beliefs and even their own blind spots.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, that's, that whole concept of psychological safety. I have to feel psychologically safe with you, that you're not going to, this isn't going to hurt. You're not going to make me wrong. You're not going to make me feel bad. I have to have trust that before I'm going to open up to you and have a conversation. So when you say trust, I would define that a little bit more, that I'm trusting that this conversation is going to feel okay as we have it.
One of the things then, as I'm processing this and I'm trying to think through, okay, great, let's get the boots on the ground here for what a salesperson has to deal with. I mean, I can offer just sort of that, the pithy advice: be nice, everybody, be nice. And yet there is a strong connection between the idea that if I'm nice, I'm likable, and if I'm likable, I am trustworthy. It's a little psychological shortcut that people tend to take, but it's got to be deeper than that. Are there practical tips that you would look at to say, here is if somebody came up to me and said, Dr. Reynolds, what's the best way to encourage an atmosphere of trust when I'm talking to somebody for the first time?
Well, it does come back. 2 of the things is that maintaining that trust in a person, belief in them and their highest potential. The emotions you bring in, you don't want to be irritated or impatient or anything like that. But going back to understanding what's the outcome they want, you can kind of track that back to what we started this conversation was, what's most important to this person. So like you said, be nice, but here you are talking to me who has 3 advanced degrees. Obviously, one of the things it's important to me is that I know things. Okay. So if you're trying to sell me something and you try to make me wrong, okay, that's it. Boom, we're done.
Right.
You know,
right.
You've got to acknowledge to me that I'm a fairly smart person and I know things. So if I at all feel like you're testing my knowledge, then I just will totally shut down. So again, understanding what people need. I mean, nice is not that important to me. Acknowledging, who I am and what's important to me is far more critical in this conversation.
It's just that sense it's that sense of unilateral respect. Then I've made a decision as to how I'm going to even feel about you, even before this conversation started.
Yeah, well, that, and I would do my homework and trying to find out who is this person, what's important to them before I even have the conversation.
Sure, yeah.
If possible.
Yeah. You wrote the book, The Discomfort Zone, right up my alley. I love this topic. I think that we really underplay how crippling our desire for comfort can be and how limiting it can be in our lives. You seem to suggest that the discomfort zone is a beautiful place. Explain that.
Well, first off, so many people avoid anything that's uncomfortable, and so then you're missing opportunities. It's that what makes you uncomfortable is probably something important that I should know. So, and also, when I'm starting to see that how I see the world and how I see myself, that maybe there's something else beyond that may not be comfortable for me, yet that's the only way I can change. So sometimes discomfort is a sign that a change is about to take place. So don't run from the discomfort. Try to understand what's making this person uncomfortable in this moment, because that's going to be big clues to you as to what is it that they need to move forward.
If I'm a salesperson, I'm talking to a customer, and the customer is showing me signs of discomfort, my gut reaction, my non-scientific reaction would suggest that, boy, if I, as a salesperson, adopt the discomfort and show signs of discomfort myself, then I'm really going to end up validating their discomfort. Is that accurate?
Well, I would go back to that. If I'm with somebody and they're uncomfortable, I'm not going to mirror their discomfort. I want to hold that safe space, that, I care about them. I'm curious. I care. I respect them, and I want to help them reach their end result. So I need to hold that safe space for them to go through their discomfort, not make it go away. So in that safe space, if they're trusting me, then I can try to understand what's making you uncomfortable at this moment. Sure. What is it that you're thinking about, or what's now in conflict for you? And be real curious about. So when I said notice, don't just summarize their words, but notice their emotional shifts. There's always key clues when somebody has an emotional shift, whether it's shift to excitement or a shift to fear. And to say, wow, I just noticed this shift, and then ask about it, to be curious and what's going on. And don't let them just say nothing. Say, yeah, but that was a big shift. I just want to know, like, was it something I said? Was it something you were thinking about? To explore that moment instead of, trying to make it go away. That's what's critical.
It's interesting. I was researching a book. This was a few years back, and I was talking to a psychologist, and I can't remember the exact context of the conversation, but I referenced almost in passing a relationship with my father, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But the psychologist at that point stopped me. Now, he was being interviewed as an expert in the book, but he stopped me and he just went, "Wait, stop, Jeff. What just happened there? Something just happened. What just happened there?" And I recognized that he couldn't even help himself as a psychologist to be able to look at it and say, there was a shift. Something happened right there. And he was so in tune to that we actually sidetracked for a good, healthy 10 minutes. But it sounds like that's what you're talking about, that just as a life skill and then more importantly as a sales skill, to be able to read into somebody, that was a shift. What just happened? That was a shift.
Absolutely. And I want to just track back to, when you had said before about counseling, and I said, well, it's coaching. It's that I want people to understand that noticing somebody's emotions is not therapy. And that's why I say it's a part of coaching skill, because it's just noticing and being curious. You're not solving anything. And now your psychologist may be skilled to try to go back in your history to find out what happened, but most of us, most people are not. But it's okay just to say, just something important happened there. So tell me about that, and then relate that to the conversation that you're having.
So even just on a very practical.
If they say, I have, this is something, that happened with my father years ago, then maybe it's good to say, well, have you ever seen anyone for that?
Right, sure, yeah, exactly. But on a very practical level, if I say to a customer, the payment on this is going to be X, and I see a flinch, I see a clearly awkward reaction, this is the point where you would recommend we're going to go, okay, hey, talk to me. What just happened right there? Tell me how that sat with you.
So I'm gathering that maybe this isn't what you expected. So tell me what happened, and just say that. You don't have to even say much more. Just tell me what happened there. Yeah,
we're just about out of time. Give us a piece of practical advice. If you were going into sales tomorrow, you would be different than most salespeople because you would focus on what?
Back on what I said, and what is it that's most important to them? What's the outcome that they want that I can help them achieve?
Dr. Marcia Reynolds, the author of Outsmart Your Brain, The Discomfort Zone. You can follow Marcia Reynolds on outsmartyourbrain.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well as references and show you where to buy the book as well. Really great stuff. Very important content here for what we do every day and trying to help our customers and serve our customers as best we can. Dr. Reynolds, thanks so much for being on The Buyer's Mind.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, Murph. Well, there you go. Once again, boy, we get some smart people on this show, don't we?
We do, and it's always great when they mention Dr. Kahneman because I get another $10 bonus. So that's good.
That's right. That's exactly right. Absolutely. I thought it was interesting where Dr. Reynolds was talking about that motivation of safety versus the motivation of adventure. For me, I consider myself to be an adventure guy. How do you see yourself along those? If you only had those two choices, where would you put yourself?
Well, it's interesting because as an organization, we just did some personality profiling, right? And what safety was one of the high marks for me. So I'm a safety guy.
Yeah. And there's no right or wrong on this, but there's no question that we can see. And again, since you mentioned it, even in that profiling that we did as a team here at Shore Consulting, it was really interesting because for me, I'm an adventure guy. Let's do this. Here, woo, everybody go. And then all the safeties on my team are like, oh, well, hold on a second here. Do you have a plan in place for that? And where are we hoping to go along those lines? And by the way, is this new initiative more important than the last initiative you threw at us 5 days ago that you said was going to change the world? So my sense is that the adventure types can frustrate the safety types a little bit.
A little bit, because we want to know where are we going with this? What is the plan? And meanwhile, I know that we don't want to pour water on the fire of your excitement, because oftentimes the ideas that the adventure people come up with are brilliant and groundbreaking ideas, but it's a matter of getting out of our comfort zone and being ready to move.
But the issue as it relates to sales professionals is that you might be a very adventuresome salesperson. You might look even at a customer and say, oh, come on, this is a no-brainer. This is the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. And you've got somebody out there who craves safety, and you're going to alienate them in a hurry. I assume that's how you would be feeling if you were a buyer in that environment.
yeah, no, you're dragging me kicking and screaming into this, and I'm going to dig my heels even a little bit more. So, I think having that EQ, the emotional intelligence, to be able to read your customer and understand that, they're starting to kick in their heels, and I'm dragging them to where they want to be instead of having them go to where they want to be. That's important.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I love the whole conversation about psychological safety and about how we can, as sales professionals, make people feel psychologically safe. To me, this was the single greatest takeaway from the conversation. Is there a shift to excitement, or is there a shift to fear? Your customer is constantly shifting emotionally all throughout the conversation. You could just think of this emotional altitude. That's the term that we use at Shore Consulting. Your customer has this emotional altitude that's constantly being shifted by the environment around him or her. And so what happens here is when that shift takes place, what kind of shift was it? If we as salespeople are emotionally intelligent enough to be able to read people, to look at them, to see that something just happened, say, okay, tell me what you're thinking right there. They asked me an innocuous little question. I gave them an innocuous little answer, but there was a shift, and you can see it. You can see it in the facial posture. You can see it in the body language. Don't gloss over that. Stop, back it down a little bit and go, What just happened right there? And what Dr. Reynolds taught us today is what we've heard on this podcast over and over again. The sales process is not about the product, and it's certainly not about the salesperson. A great sales process is customer first. It's customer focused. It's how do I serve these people? How do I help them to do what they want to do anyway? And that is when sales becomes a noble profession. So I want to encourage you today even to take these words and think about, how do I get out of myself and into my customer? How do I get away from what is in it for me or my sale or my commission? How can I look at it and say, what today is in the best interest of my customer? We will always serve people best when we put them first. Well, we hope you're enjoying our podcast. If you have subscribed, thank you so much. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be great. What we'd really love is a post onto your social media page. Could you think about doing that right now if you're enjoying the podcast? Post a link to your social media page. But that's a wrap on today's episode of The Buyer's Mind. You can find everything you need at jeffshore.com. But until next time, my friends, you know what to do. Go out there and change someone's world.